let's switch things up a gear. It's time for F-Zero. F-Zero was the other game released in Japan for the launch of the Super Famicom on 21st of November 1990. Sometimes, when I have some time to myself, I like to spend 20 to 40 minutes imagining how happy the few thousand Japanese people were, the ones who managed to get a Super Famicom and both of these games at launch. Ah, the past. Things sure were better then. We're neither left nor right.
That's right.
We think both sides are ridiculous. We're independent thinkers. We believe in free speech. We're anti-woke.
We're anti-woke.
Lynch the woke and the left and the immigrants and the blacks and the Jews and the Muslims. Free speech.
I need to prefix the comparison of the Japanese and European box art by saying that Japanese box art was typically much better than Western box art. One of the most offensive examples has to be Mega Man. Here's the Japanese version. Nice. That's Mega Man. I sure want to play this game. And now the Western box art. What the What? What is this? The main reason for changing the box art came down to a belief that Western audiences would be repelled by artwork that looked too foreign. Japanese cartoons like Thundercats and Transformers were wildly popular in the West, but to be fair, we didn't know they were Japanese at the time. We only found that out after Dragon Ball got popular and snitched. But the weird thing about changing the box art for F-Zero's Western release is the whole style of the F-Zero universe, particularly Captain Falcon, is very clearly influenced by the Judge Dredd comics in the British comic series 2000 AD. The character designs, box art, and comic were all done by Takaya Imamura, and F-Zero was the first game he worked on after joining Nintendo. Imamura would go on to work on Star Fox, designing the characters for that, and then he was instrumental in the development of Majora's Mask, where he changed the designs and look of the Ocarina of Time assets to give them that creepy, upside-down Wonderland feeling, which helped the game feel so different. Before retiring from Nintendo in 2021, Imamura also directed Steel Diver on the 3DS, which I absolutely love. It's like a bizarre flight simulator where you have to plan ahead. It's not quite like anything else. Imamura also designed Tingle, the biggest weirdo in Zelda games. The Japanese box art for F-Zero is really nice. The Western box art is fine, but it has this type of airbrush shading that was popular in the 90s and always made things look cheaper to me. This type of shading was very frequently used for the covers of Disney VHS tapes. Here's what Aladdin looks like in the film. The coloring is very clean and simple, there's no shading or shadows, each color has one tone to it. And here's what he looks like on the VHS cover. The reason for this is that animated characters need minimal shading, otherwise drawing thousands of cells would take too long and cost too much. But for the VHS covers, they splashed out on this fancy, revolting artwork. Disney did manage to add this horrible airbrush shading to some of their later films like The Lion King, using their computer animated production system, or CAPS, which was co-developed by Pixar. I have a 3-year-old, by the way. That's the reason so much of my film analysis these days is of cartoons. Another interesting thing about the Japanese box art is there are no screenshots of the game at all on the box. The reason for this is it doesn't look good in screenshots, only in motion. The Japanese version also plays up the story element. The cartridge proclaims this to be the first chapter in Captain Falcon's story, which is an interesting assertion because the only formal story in F-Zero X was a brief introduction in the manual, whereas the SNES game had a little comic in the manual. Interestingly, it's the same comic in both the Japanese and Western versions. The Japanese manual even has English text, with numbered endnotes providing a Japanese translation. But that's pretty much it for the story of F-Zero until F-Zero GX's story mode. I understand one or two of the Game Boy Advance F-Zero games also had a story, and there was even an anime series, but I haven't seen any of those. And this may sound egotistical, but as far as I'm concerned, if I didn't see or experience something directly, it didn't happen. I'm sorry if that's not woke enough for you. I think I hear the sirens of the cancel culture brigade coming to take me away. So it seems strange to me that there was an emphasis on the game's story. I can explain it by noting that RPGs like Dragon Quest were huge in Japan. The country basically shut down for the day when a new Dragon Quest game came out. So Nintendo thought promising a story could help sell this game, even if they possibly had very little intention of actually continuing the story until years later. A big part of the feel of the story is the 4 playable characters, who fit racing game archetypes we've come to know. Captain Falcon is the balanced one and the noble hero, though he does have a slightly darker side than most other Nintendo characters of the time. He's more than happy to gun down a criminal, for example. Dr. Stuart has good acceleration, a low top speed, and weak armor. Pico has the second best top speed and second worst acceleration, but the armor on his craft is strong and good for ramming into the walls on purpose, as I demonstrate here. Samurai Goroh is the Bowser, the Juggernaut, with low acceleration but the best top speed. And all of the 4 characters have a lot of mystery to them. Captain Falcon is described as a mysterious figure from Port Town who is now a legendary bounty hunter. Pico, the only non-human of the 4, is rumored to be an assassin. Dr. Stuart is a medical doctor who seems to have entered the race to honor his deceased father, but in the comic, he says he's trying to win the race to honor beautiful women everywhere, so his motivations are a little confused. I think they were going for a sort of James Bond vibe there. And Samurai Goroh is a criminal, a gangster, and seems to have some history with the lawman Captain Falcon, so there's a kind of rivalry there. You would think that it's up to the story writer to decide whether Pico is an assassin or not, so there shouldn't be any rumors about it. But the point of this vagueness is it hints at a larger universe outside of the game, and you're forced to fill in these gaps with your own imagination, which will always be more powerful than anything you actually see. I can say that this promise of a story definitely worked on me when I was a kid, and I couldn't wait for the next chapter. There is also a lot of suggestion in the course names, like Mute City or Silence. The mega city in the background of Mute City and the busy roads to the sides of the racecourse feel like they must be populated with real people and real stories just waiting to be discovered. Silence is supposedly an entirely silent planet, completely devoid of sound, a claim which is immediately debunked by the very first second of being there. While there's very little official story present in F-Zero X, the kind of environmental and incidental storytelling from the first game continues. Characters like Blood Falcon hint at stories you have to imagine or discover through secondary research. Blood Falcon seems to be an evil clone of Captain Falcon, and Mr. and Mrs. Arrow seem to be a husband and wife superhero team who drive machines called King Meteor and Queen Meteor. All these details are really evocative and give you a strong sense of the universe. But the closest thing to a more traditional story you get is these imperatives delivered by your character when you finish a circuit. F-Zero itself was a technical showcase for the Super Famicom. The Super Famicom had a graphical mode called Mode 7, which allowed for manipulation of 2D objects, providing the ability to rotate objects or bring them closer to or further away from the screen. It was used really effectively in racing games like F-Zero, and Nintendo wanted this at launch to help show off what the new console could do. It was really graphically impressive, but one detail which blew my mind when I first played it is the way the sides of the crafts scrape along the ground when you turn with the D-pad and shoulder buttons at the same time. And I love how you could see Captain Falcon leaning from side to side through his cockpit windshield. I'd never seen anything so realistic in a game before. Miyamoto said in interviews that the futuristic design of the hovercars came about due to technical restraints. They found that adding wheels to the cars doubled the amount of memory needed, and adding things like smoke coming out of the wheels when turning a tight corner was even more demanding. But even so, when I was a kid, I loved all the little details. The way the fins at the back of the crafts turned from side to side felt so real to me, and the way the cars slam against the ground when coming down from a jump felt like it had some real weight behind it. By getting rid of wheels, they were able to focus on some other details to make the world feel more real. As frequently happens when something is this groundbreaking, it becomes hard to gauge its influence, but its bizarre idiosyncrasies stand out a lot more in hindsight. Racing games before F-Zero were not like this. In the 70s, there were some electromechanical games like Speedway, which gave the impression of a perspective behind your car. But due to the technological limitations, you were constantly driving in a wide circle. Before Mode 7, racing games on consoles had to have a fixed perspective. There were some games like Mac Rider, which gave the impression of moving through a 3D space, but what's really happening here is more like a treadmill. You aren't actually moving, it's just that all the background visuals are being swapped out to give you a sense of movement. Something similar is happening in Outrun, but at a much more complex and expensive level. So F-Zero pushed console racing games ahead light years by having an actual space which existed independent of your perspective. You can't turn around in Outrun or Mac Rider because there's nothing behind you. Although F-Zero uses a large 2D sheet and manipulates it to make it seem like you're exploring a 3D space, it was still much more tangible than the games which came before. One of the bizarre idiosyncrasies which still stand out is the way the other three races are the only real craft. All of the other vehicles are just moving obstacles. The flashing ones are primed to explode if you collide with them, which I decided to demonstrate here on purpose. It's also quite obvious that the other races do not exist in the space with the same persistence as you, because the moment you slow down or bump into something, you get overtaken. This isn't how the practice mode works though. In that, you can see the other racer on the map, and they exist outside of your perspective. The technology of racing games was pushed even further with Super Mario Kart a couple of years later. With F-Zero, Nintendo wanted to include a two-player mode, but couldn't because of memory constraints. F-Zero was so fast that you can end up ping-ponging madly between the course walls, as I decided to demonstrate here on purpose. And it's so fast, the speedometer just gives up when you boost. It's like, listen mate, you're going fast. You're somewhere in the 400 to 500 range. The speed of F-Zero was just too high to accommodate a split screen, so they had to slow it down and thought go-karts would make a good, slower vehicle. And that's how the best-selling racing game series of all time was made. But the important thing I want to draw attention to here is that all 8 racers are present on the map at all times. They exist with permanence in the space, unlike the other racers in F-Zero. For me, F-Zero X on the N64 is the peak of the series, and F-Zero on the SNES is just good. The music to F-Zero also only makes sense after you've heard the music in the sequel, which has this amazing Japanese electro speed synth metal soundtrack. In terms of Japanese electro speed synth metal game soundtracks, it's got to be at least in the top 100. The music to F-Zero on the SNES has a lot of the same compositions as F-Zero X, but it's a lot softer. It's like elevator music, if the elevator was in a real hurry, like it was being chased by a T-Rex. Alright, that's it for today. Now go outside and play with your friends.